Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's an exciting time of the year if you're a fan of wrestling magazines and or lists, because the PWI 500 has been released, and of course, as they do every year, they've made public their top 10. But to find out the full 500, you've got to buy the bloody magazine, haven't you? So in this video, I'm going to run down the top 10 from 10 all the way to number 1, take a look at each guy, see what they've done in the past year, and really work out, I guess, do a bit of analysis and work out whether we agree or not with their placing on the PWI 500. There are a couple of things to note first, however. The first thing is that Pro Wrestling Illustrated does not rank their wrestlers in the same way as, like, The Observer would. It's a strange blend of real life stuff and kayfabe stuff. So you've got to take the prominence of the wrestler into account and their skill in the ring and everything. But on the other hand, you've also got to take into account their success in the world of wrestling. Have they won a top championship, for example? Have they defeated a big opponent? That all gets taken into account as well. And what you get is kind of a strange and very debatable list, and one that I think kind of tries its best to reflect both the kayfabe world of wrestling and the smarky, dirty world that we inhabit as well. Hooray. A couple of other things to mention as well. The evaluation period for the PWI 500 does not run from January to now. It's not like a 2019 thing. It's more of a entire year thing. It's the past 12 months. So it's from, you know, this summer back to last summer. So we're not taking into account things that happened, I guess, just before last summer, like this time last year. So there'll be one or two little things that might not make sense at first, but then you might think, oh, they haven't quite evaluated that yet, or that happened before their last evaluation period had started. You know what I mean, you understand what I mean. And finally, there are no women in this list because there is a separate women's PWI list that comes out, I'm not entirely certain when, but it comes out in the near future, I believe. So this is just the men's wrestling divisions around the world, and let's crack on and see who the top 10 are. Just before that, however, let's take a look at some people I was surprised to see miss out on the top 10. Pac, because of his really strong time in Dragon Gate, and I think, you know, he probably did enough to warrant a place in the top 10 given the strength and the prestige of his Open the Dream Gate Championship reign. At the same time, maybe Dragon Gate don't factor too heavily into PWI's determination of what is a big promotion in kayfabe and that sort of thing. I don't really know, but I thought Pac did a good enough job to make it in the top 10, but sadly he didn't. Tommaso Ciampa as well, just because I loved his NXT Championship reign, and I think he did enough within the evaluation period to really deserve a top 10 spot, but he didn't get one. Kento Miyahara, All Japan's ace as well, has had a very strong year, and Volta, the NXT UK champion too, but especially Pac and Ciampa and Kento. I'm really surprised that those three couldn't quite make the list. Jay White as well, bloody forgot about Jay White, winning the New Japan IWGP Heavyweight Championship out of nowhere. A really quick but effective push for the Switchblade wasn't enough to get him a top 10 spot. And just two more names if we're going a little bit more indie, although I'm not too surprised to see them miss out, but I do think maybe they should have been ranked even higher than they were. Austin Theory, the Evolve champion currently, and of course a future WWE superstar. You can just tell it's written in the stars for him. And Jeff Cobb as well, the current Pro Wrestling Guerrilla champion, has had a very strong year in PWG too. Right now, with that all said and done, let's crack on with the top 10. So number 10 on the 2019 PWI 500 is someone I talk about quite a lot. It's Will Osprey. Osprey deserves his spot in the top 10 in my opinion. He was 12th last year, which I think was too low, but they've rectified that a little bit by giving him a top 10 spot in 2019, not just for his excellent in-ring ability and his pioneering moveset and just his improvements that he's made to his own game as well, but also his kayfabe success as well. He did of course win Best of the Super Juniors this year, defeating Shingo Takagi in an excellent final, a match of the year contender, and also he is the current IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion too. He also won the Never Openweight Championship earlier on in the year, defeating Kota Ibushi in a wonderful match at Wrestle Kingdom 13, and also put in some amazing performances in this year's G1 Climax, although that did fall outside of the evaluation period for this PWI 500. But still, it's been a monumental year for Will Osprey, a fantastic past 12 months, and I think he's fully deserving of the number 10 spot. You could even argue maybe a little bit higher. Let's take a look at the names above him. First of all, actually, a name that I don't think Osprey should be above, certainly if we're taking kayfabe achievements into account, which we are, and that is the ace, or the former ace, depending on your view of it, of New Japan, Hiroshi Tanahashi. He actually hasn't been in the top 10 of the PWI 500 since 2013, but came storming back and is in at number 9 this year, and it's pretty easy to see why. He won the G1 Climax last year, which falls into the evaluation period, and also won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship at Wrestle Kingdom, defeating the outgoing Kenny Omega in a great match as well, another match of the year candidate. He also had a host of amazing matches in that G1 Climax as well, against the likes of Okada, his old foe, and Kota Ibushi in the final as well. And apparently, according to PWI, although I've not actually checked this, I've not verified it, but I trust them, I guess, he is in fact the current modern points record holder. I don't know what defines modern, but in the G1 Climax, he got 15 points, and that is apparently a modern points record, so fair play, mate. He had a very, very strong past 12 months, and of course his reign didn't last very long. He lost it pretty sharpish to Jay White, but I still think that Tanahashi deserves his top 10 place, and at 42 years old, he's still one of the best wrestlers in the world. Truly remarkable. Just stop doing friggin' air guitar after you've what? Smug bastard. Number 8, last year's number 1 on the list is now down in number 8, and his name is Kenny Omega. Omega was the IWGP champion at the start of the evaluation period, having won it the previous time around in that excellent, amazing 2 out of 3 falls match with Okada at Dominion. But then this year, we've got to take into account his defenses, which were against the likes of Ishii, and in a triple threat match, which is rare for New Japan, against both Cody Rhodes and Kota Ibushi. But then, of course, heading into January, Omega lost that title at Wrestle Kingdom in that main event against Tanahashi. And since then, because of All Elite Wrestling taking off and having to do loads of stuff outside the ring, we haven't seen Omega wrestle quite as much as we're used to. He did have some big matches, of course. He beat Pentagon at All In slightly before that Wrestle Kingdom match, and he also lost to Chris Jericho at Double or Nothing, a big high-profile loss actually, which may have hurt his standing in this top 10. But still, Omega is one of the best around, and I think number 8 is pretty spot on. I think PWI have pretty much nailed that in my opinion, and I can't wait to see his match with Pac. He is still the best bout machine as Kenny Omega, we just don't see enough of him. And that's a shame. Next up at number 7, a non-mover. I feel like a bloody radio DJ. Not moving out at number 7, and someone that I'm surprised has kept the number 7 spot actually for obvious reasons, and his name is Roman Reigns. Now obviously one of the biggest and in the end most uplifting wrestling stories in recent memory was Roman Reigns returning to the ring after sadly being diagnosed with leukemia, and we're all so delighted to see him back. Now because of that, understandably, Roman hasn't occupied quite as prominent a position in WWE's hierarchy as he previously has, which is why I'm surprised, of course, that he's still number 7 on this list. He did have some big wins, of course, before he was diagnosed. He did beat Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam to finally win that Universal Championship, and he also, after he returned to the ring, got a big victory over Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania. But aside from that, even during his time back in the company, Roman has kind of not been a true main eventer, I don't think. He obviously had that Shield reunion just before Ambrose left, and he also, I guess, has been feuding with, like, Elias. Do you see what I mean? He hasn't really been mixing it up as much as we're used to seeing the big dog do in main events. But still, we do have to look at those 2 massive, massive results for Roman, the victory over Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam and the emotional victory upon his return at WrestleMania against Drew McIntyre. So even though I don't think he should quite be number 7, I don't think he should be way down the bottom of the list or anything. I think he's still a very prominent and key figure in the wrestling world. Next up, number 6, Johnny Gargano. Last year he was number 34, which I think was far too low, but PWI have righted some of those wrongs and they've shot him up well into the top 10. Now this is a meteoric rise for Gargano, but one that actually makes a lot of sense, of course. Right at the start of the year in January, he won the NXT North American Championship from Ricochet, and then after he lost that belt, he obviously beat Adam Cole for the NXT Championship. It should have been Ciampa, they should have carried on that storyline, but obviously injuries and real life got in the way. But still, Gargano and Cole made the best of a bad situation and really tore into each other in that feud, and it was a really impressive one. Now, opinion does seem to be a little bit split on Gargano, however. I think some people may have soured on Gargano just because it's kind of a mini John Cena situation. He is now, after turning face again, a really clean-cut guy. He doesn't have any sort of edge about him compared to some of the other wrestlers on the NXT roster, and also, as well, he does kick out of a lot of big moves. I understand that. But with all that being said, I'm still a huge fan of Johnny Gargano, and I'm just really kind of anxious and excited as well to see what he does next, because is he going to stay at NXT? Is he going to go to the main roster? And if he does go to the main roster, is he going to be allowed to thrive there? Next up, number 5, the current IWGP Heavyweight Champion and the Rainmaker himself, Kazuchika Okada. Over the past few years, Okada has finished on the PWI 500 2nd, 1st, 3rd, and now 5th, which really just goes to show his dominance of this current era of wrestling. And this year's been big, you know. Obviously, Okada had a tough time in last year's G1. It was when he went through his mini crisis kind of breakdown thing, dyeing his hair red, bringing balloons to the ring for some reason, and didn't actually make the finals of that G1 Climax. But he was able to win the 2019 New Japan Cup, and in the process secured himself a title shot for Jay White's title at MSG. And then in the world's most famous arena, over WrestleMania weekend, Okada did beat Jay White to reclaim that title that he's really made his own over the past few years. And it was, I think it must go down as one of the biggest wrestling results of the year. Certainly as well from a kayfabe perspective. How massive's that? Going to New York, kicking the crap out of a dirty heel, winning your belt back? It's fairy tale stuff. And since then, Okada's reign has been pretty damn good, although the biggest match actually of his reign so far was maybe my least favourite match of his reign, which is, it's funny how that works, when he successfully defended the title against Chris Jericho at Dominion. A match that wasn't really for me, but I can sort of understand why people enjoyed it, I suppose. It was still a big result regardless. I mean, beating Chris Jericho, even in 2019, is a huge deal. Okada seems set to defend his title against Kota Ibushi, the G1 Climax winner, at Wrestle Kingdom, although he will have to keep a hold of his title until then, and, you know, the first challenge is a pretty big one. Tomorrow at the time of recording against Minoru Suzuki at Royal Quest in London. Number 4, a man who was 82nd in last year's PWI 500 but has since skyrocketed up to number 4. It's the WWE champion, Kofi Kingston. If you follow Kofi's career, this inexplicable leap makes a hell of a lot of sense because Kofi's push came out of nowhere, but at the same time, in a weird way, it was totally fully deserved, not just because of all of the years of service and excellence that Kofi brought to WWE's tag division and mid-card and everything, but also because he really seized the moment at the start of this year and really ran with it. After those gauntlet matches and the Elimination Chamber and everything, it all culminated at WrestleMania, where he won the title in a very emotional match against Daniel Bryan, finally becoming WWE champion, and it was just amazing. Since then, his title reign's been, I guess, a little bit imperfect. You know, it hasn't been the cleanest title reign of all time, but at the same time, he has been booked as a strong champion. It's been clean in one sense. It hasn't been cleanest in terms of the quality of the booking, but it has been pretty clean in terms of results. He's beaten the likes of Dolph Ziggler in that cage match. He's beaten, I believe, Kevin Owens as well, and he's currently embroiled in a big feud as well with Randall Keith. So yeah, a great year for Kofi. Can't argue with a high placing on the list for him. What a monumental rise it's been for someone who really fully deserves it. Next up, number 3, AJ Styles, who in the past few years has finished 4th, 2nd, and now 3rd. Just gonna check that's right, because that's surely ludicrous. 4, 2, and this year 3. Wow. There's only one problem, and the problem is that I think that AJ Styles, and this is no knock on the man himself, I'm a huge fan of his, but I think just given the past 12 months he's had, this is way too high a ranking for him. I'm sorry, but I just feel that that is the case. And yes, he was WWE champion at the start of the evaluation period. He was embroiled in that kind of messy feud with Samoa Joe that was filled with a lot of screwy finishes and DQs and that sort of thing. But eventually he vanquished Joe. He then won a feud, a brief one with Rusev, and then he lost the title to Daniel Bryan when Bryan turned heel. Since then, Styles hasn't really had the most active year. I know that he can still put on wonderful matches. I know he had a great one against Rollins, for example, but he has taken a little bit of time off here and there. And also as well, I know that he's the current United States champion, but he actually won that title after PWI's evaluation period had finished, so they haven't taken that win into account. So I'm really struggling to see where this 3rd place comes from. I guess it's probably because he was WWE champion at the start of their evaluation period for this year's list, but at the same time, I'd argue that Kofi should be higher than Styles. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Next up, number 2, Daniel Bryan. He topped the list in 2014, but at the same time, he's obviously been inactive on the list for a couple of years given his retirement, and he returned to the PWI 500 last year, finishing 91st, but this year, he is number 2. It's kind of hard to place Bryan in my opinion. I can't actually work out whether I agree with this placement or not, because yes, his heel run with the belt was fantastic, but since he lost the belt, he's kind of just been a member of the tag division alongside Rowan. He hasn't been kind of similar to Roman Reigns, he hasn't been as prominent a player as we're used to seeing it. But still, I have to commend Bryan for still being absolutely fantastic in the ring. You know, he doesn't seem to have lost a step. He's still one of the most captivating performers, not just in WWE, but in World Wrestling. He obviously had that great match with Kofi at WrestleMania and made it more emotional and effective than it even would have been anyway if it wasn't Bryan. That was probably the best match of this year's WrestleMania. He also had that wonderful match at Survivor Series 2018 in the main event against Brock Lesnar when he really announced himself as like being back and back to his best. So yes, Daniel Bryan, 2nd place. The more I talk about it actually, the harder I find it to disagree with this placement by PWI. And number 1, and the man sitting atop the PWI 500 in 2019, it's his 2nd number 1 placement in recent years. It's Seth Rollins. Yeah, Rollins has obviously had a really eventful 12 months. He's been IC champion, a really good IC champion actually, one who really managed to hold up Monday Night Raw while Brock Lesnar was being an absentee champion. He's been a Raw Tag Team champion alongside Dean Ambrose, his former Shield brother, but then obviously Ambrose turned on him and it all got a bit Their feud wasn't perfect, I'll give you that. But then in January, Seth Rollins won the Royal Rumble and things just took off from there. He obviously beat Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship in really quick fashion in the opening match of WrestleMania, one of the most brilliant and inventive openings to a WrestleMania I can remember. And yeah, I mean, Rollins is the top babyface now in WWE. And even though it's a position that isn't the most natural fit for him at all times, he reminds us how great he is every time he steps inside the ring. More recently, he had a great match with AJ Styles at Money in the Bank, and also had a great match with Lesnar at SummerSlam to win the Universal title again for a second time, but that did fall outside the evaluation period, so we can't really take that one into account. But even not taking that into account, it's still been a monumental year for Seth Rollins. And yeah, I don't think I can argue too much with him being number one. I think my big takeaways actually are that I would have placed Tanahashi way higher. I'd probably have knocked Kofi ahead of Styles, maybe even knocked Styles out of the top 10, not to disrespect the man too much because he's one of the best in the world. It's just not been that busy a year for him. But I think when it comes to the top, maybe it's hard to argue with Rollins. Maybe he has had the best year from a kayfabe and non-kayfabe perspective combined. And I guess that's, yeah, seems like a pretty sound ending to the video. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.